Days of Moon.
Welcome to the third phase of Moon. My name's Blake Cousins. Now get ready for the start of an amazing journey. The largest YouTube channel is now on the largest civilian-run radio station, Third Phase of Moon Radio with researchers on a mission. Host Dr. J. Andy Elias and best-selling author, MUFON investigator Preston Dennett are about to take you on all the rides of our lives. We'll be taking UFO news, interviewing top researchers. The journey begins now. Third Phase of Moon Radio is officially on air. Without further ado, here comes Third Phase of Moon, researchers on a mission.
That's right. Just a reminder that you are listening to Revolution Radio, the world's largest listener-supported station, and we need your help to continue the free flow of ideas and to stay out of corporate hands. Go to freedomslips.com and hit the support button now. And now, we welcome you back to another episode of Third Phase of Moon Radio. We have an amazing show for you today, but first we got to inform you of some tragic news since our last show last week. Dr. Roger K. Lear, known worldwide as the alien implant doctor, has passed away and left us. He passed away this last Friday, and this Saturday is going to be a tribute to him. One during the day that his family's doing, but a major one at an event, Zero International, which brings in what we're going to be speaking about today. Yvonne Smith, who founded Zero International, is here with us today. Yvonne, how are you today?
I'm good, John. Thank you for having me on.
It's always a pleasure to have you on. You know, you've really helped thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people globally. As I just said off air, I met a woman that was visiting here from China, and she knew Zero. She saw a Zero flyer and instantly had it in her hand. I said, "Oh, are you going?" She goes, "Oh, I didn't know they were doing events, but I go to Zero International support groups." I said, "Oh, locally?" She said, "No, in China." And this just proved to me how much of a global impact you have. And she was so happy to know that she was going to come to meet you. I hope she had a chance to do that. But that's just one of thousands and thousands of examples. And let me just clarify for everybody, Zero International is C-E-R-O. It is an acronym. I believe there's two of them, right? There's Close Encounters Research Organization and then Close Encounters Resource Organization, right?
Right, the resource organization, Zero, that's the original support group that I founded 22 years ago, and for the purpose of experiencers meeting once a month in a private, safe setting for them to be able to talk to each other without feeling ridiculed or having their pictures taken. And this has been going on. It still goes on every month at 3 different locations because we've grown so much. And because we've grown so much, it really gives me the indication that there's so much need for this support out there for people who are having experiences. And then we branched off to Zero International, Close Encounter Resource Organization, where this is open to the public. We are inviting different speakers, many of my colleagues, every 2 months. We don't have it every month, but every 2 months, and it's all about education.
Now, I want to just add, she's helped, like I said, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, which could be even greater. In 1991, there was a Roper poll which showed 4 million Americans were abducted, but that's just America. Yvonne, what do you think the number is globally?
Oh gosh, it just, it really is mind-boggling when you stop and think that, you know, that Roper poll came out saying 1 out of 50 American adults, and I imagine it's the same in other countries, because when I have gone to speak several times, I will be going to Brazil in May, people do come up to me afterwards because something in my PowerPoint presentation, they resonated with, something struck them about their own experiences, and even when they're not able to speak English, they will speak through an interpreter to me. So I imagine that it is going to be the same type of statistics there, because it's a worldwide phenomenon. I mean, it's just not in the United States, as we all know now.
And this, again, this just goes to show how much of a tremendous help Yvonne Smith has been throughout the world. And she truly is international. Like she said, she's going to Brazil. She's lectured in several countries. Yvonne, what other countries? Just spit some out there to tell people, because this is an international show. We have a lot of listeners in America, but we do have listeners in Australia, in UK, China, you name it. And I'm sure some people out there listening may be experiencers that may very well have a support group near them, a serial support group.
Well, we in the years past, I've been to England and Italy a few times. I'm going back to Brazil, and this is in May, and in September I will be traveling to Canada again to do another conference. And then whichever in between, you know, and of course in July I'll be back in Roswell, where I've lectured there for the last 10 years. And I imagine that I will be getting more invitations globally when my new book about the mass abduction comes out in July. So hopefully that'll stir much interest, because people often do not get abducted alone, but they will get abducted in pairs or in groups.
But you mentioned your new book. Let's give some details about it. The title, so people out there listening can know what to watch for when it comes out, the release date, and let's talk a little bit about those mass abductions before we get to Charlene.
Okay. I'll be debuting the new book at the Roswell conference. It's called Coronado: The President, the Secret Service, and Alien Abductions. And this book is mainly about a dozen people who were taken on the same weekend during a UFO conference back in March of 1994 on Coronado Island in San Diego. And back then, I was MC for a series of conferences called Triad, by the Triad organization, and they asked me to MC, and so I was there at that conference, as well as about a dozen or so of my serial members, and one by one, and you know, they started putting things together about something that may have happened. I mean, we had blood on the pillow. There was someone that was implanted during that weekend. They remembered seeing each other on the craft. And at the same time, which was very strange, was that at that time, President Clinton was arriving on the island to have a talk at the Del Coronado Hotel, where we were holding the UFO conference. So there were Secret Service swarming the entire island, so you can imagine the combination of a UFO conference and Secret Service. So it made for a very interesting weekend, but it's taken me this long to put everything together, because up until the time I began writing the book 2 years ago, I was still doing the hypnosis sessions with some of the subjects that had the experiences.
And that was a huge case, this Coronado incident. As a matter of fact, my original co-host, Preston Dennett, who joins us when he actually makes it home in time from work, wrote a book on that. Yvonne Smith has been in this field so long, she literally knows everybody involved in ufology, including Preston Dennett. And he wrote a book on the Coronado incident, and you guys did some research for it together, right?
Well, yeah, I remember he called me to ask me some questions. It was mainly one of the subjects, Mike Evans. It was mainly focused on his case, and then there were the others that were brought in. But mine goes into a lot of detail on each subject, and I have the unedited transcripts in there as well as many photographs and artwork. So Preston and I have talked about that, and it's just one of those cases that doesn't seem to go away. In fact, I have a feeling that once my book is published, I'm going to be hearing from people who were there on that island that same weekend, and who may suspect after reading the book that they may have had experiences.
And the people who have had experiences there, again, are still reliving them, because mass abductions, this is one thing that fascinates me. I remember hearing from Jim Sparks, he'll be taken from his home by himself, and then he was on aboard this giant craft where he saw 50, maybe 100 people, maybe even more, and they were all in front of this computer-like device, or it was a television screen of some sort that was showing them some images. And the way he described them is, I don't want to say he used the word zombie, but I can't think of a better word that's coming to my mind, but he said they clearly were not, seemed to be in control of themselves. They were just fixated on what they were seeing. But for some reason, he had conscious recall, and when he came in, he was actually walking to his seat with the ETs leading him to it, versus them just placing him there. So obviously he had something. That brings up a big topic, conscious recall. How many of the people that you deal with do have conscious recall?
There are several people. I'm not sure about percentages. Maybe 25% or so of the experiencers will have conscious recall. Then again, they may not have full conscious recall in one experience, but they'll have more conscious recall in another. So, but it's very rare where someone will have a completely blank, blank mind where they don't remember anything. That's always like bits and pieces of something that they found very unusual. And of course, obviously, if they wake up with scars and marks on them or blood, where it wasn't there the night before, of course that may be an indication of a definite experience.
I just wanted to give you a chance real quick to tell them again real quick about it, and of course to say hi to Charlene. Charlene, you're on with us.
Hi, Charlene.
Hi, Yvonne. Hi, John. I'm here.
Excellent.
Thank you for doing the show. I'm going to be leaving you in a few minutes, so like I said, I'm going to turn it over to the three pros that you're going to have on tonight.
Now, Charlene McCain, what's happened on your first experience? Do you recall that briefly? Then we could jump into what
yes. You want to go back to the beginning of it all?
Yes.
Okay. I want to just say hi to everybody, and I've had a lifelong experience with this. When it began, I actually was a 4-year-old. I lived in the San Fernando Valley in Pacoima, sort of the armpit of the valley, but that's where I lived. And I was 4 years old, and I had repeating dreams and night terrors. My dream was that I was being sucked up into a tunnel that I perceived as a metal tunnel, into a round metal building. And the building seemed to me to be round, all made out of metal. I can remember the rivets. There's a chair along the wall, but it's nothing, no furniture. It's all just attached. So there was like a ledge along the wall where people sat. And I'm briefly, as I'm telling you, I'm remembering, I think another child was there. And I would be taken up into this room. I'd be staring face to face with this dome-looking, they looked like silver, remember the old dome trash cans? That's what they looked like to me. You push the front open, and they look like a bullet or something like that. But this, in my mind, would look like with two very big black eyes and a little tiny slit for a mouth. And I would just immediately be screaming and be out of my mind with terror. And I
think they were robots?
Well, I have no idea about that. Also, I know it's just being confronted with it because they're my height. They're my height, so I was 4.
Oh,
and I could look them.
Very small, then.
They were small, and I could look them right in the eye. And I didn't remember until recently because I think so much of it was so terrifying to me that I blacked out a lot of stuff. Not blacked out. I think you just sublimate it so you can just live a life. But anyway, I remember turning. Go ahead.
And these types of beings are not the first to be told. And that's why one thing I loved when I was talking to Charlene off air about this, I remember seeing several drawings going back actually to the 30s, just drawings of what people have had in their contact cases. In the 30s, the 1932 case actually came out recently because the person didn't want to talk about it till the 70s, and nonetheless, the point being, he also experienced a similar robotic-looking being where it was silver, and it seemed to have like one big like you said, a trash can is the way he describes the whole.
Did he say trash can, John? Really?
He didn't say the word trash can. He said the whole thing looked like a trash can with two. He
That's
said
what it looked like to me.
He said it had two red eyes and a slit for a mouth, and he thought it was purely a robot. But also, you mentioned two other beings which are very consistent with several other reports, and I was wondering if you could describe in detail for the listeners what those also look like to you.
Okay, so this is what the next one looked like to me. They looked like to me like hummingbirds. So I woke up one time to see, I think there was two taller ones and three littler ones. So the taller ones being only, let's say, 5'3", and the other ones were like 4 feet. They all to me look like green hummingbirds with big black eyes, but they actually had arms and legs along with the wings, so it's kind of confusing when I saw them. And it took a second, so I woke up, I saw them, they were holding a little black box. To me, they had a long black beak, really long. And as soon as I saw them, one of them flew at me, the one I perceived as having this long beak, but that beak wasn't really a long beak, it was some kind of a thing that they hit me on the top. So I blocked him with my arm, and they lightly whacked into my arm, like it bounced off my arm, like real light, almost like a feather. It was that light, whack, and it buzzed me on the head and knocked me out. It was working on some kind of a black box.
And this, them shutting you down, and basically the memories that were probably locked away for years, probably until you probably had them in dreams and regressions, right?
Yes, because I went to, what happened was I was having a lot of, me and my best friend actually saw a UFO in 1987. We were going down south on the 405 freeway near Long Beach, and we saw a very low craft actually, we were in the slow lane. This craft the size of a VW, about the size, about as tall as a light pole, was coming actually over us in the slow lane. So I have felt now that it wanted us to see it, of course. We couldn't have missed it.
No,
yeah, so then we realized, that, then we had a weird experience after we went to this dance. We blacked it out. We didn't remember seeing it. We went to this dance. We left the dance, and I happened to ask this guy standing next to me, I went, when's your birthday? And he said, July 13th. I went, how odd, that's my birthday. And I turned around to my best friend. I said, didn't you see a UFO on the way over here? Like it snapped some memory in me. And then we realized we had been getting abducted all the time.
And from several people who are abduction researchers, including Yvonne Smith, who had to go, Barbara Lamb said this, Dr. Jacobs, Bud Hopkins, the number one prerequisite for an abductee is that your family has been taken, because they are involved in this breeding experiment. And you, of course, are no exception to that, because your abduction started when you were small. Although we can't prove if your mother or father had them, well, we can suspect that.
My mother saw, she said flying in formation. She's always said that all these years. When she was like 14, she was upstate New York in a park. And she saw all these white UFOs going over in formation. And when I was born, by, we're having a feedback. But when I was born by a coincidence, that's when I was born in 52, July, and that same day I was born, all those UFOs were going over D.C.
Oh, the 1952 incident where they flew over twice in a week.
Yes, I was born on that day.
People say,
That was going on.
why didn't they, when are they going to land on the, White House lawn or go over Capitol? Well, guess what, people? They did that. They didn't land,
They did that.
but they went over the Capitol twice. And this is caught on camera, and it is on, if I'm not mistaken, on the cover of LA Times or a prominent newspaper from, if it's not July 13th, it was July 14th, the next
Yeah.
very
Okay.
amazing thing.
Very strange.
Yes, yes. Now, we spoke to a very prominent ufologist who everybody is going to be hearing this, and I'll tell this again next hour, Timothy Good, and he gave me it put together a theory that has been bounced around from several people, and this is going to tie into this next question I'm going to ask you. Let me give you a little history of it. Apparently, there's rival factions of ETs. Obviously, not all of them are good, and there are definitely some that have their own agenda, and our best interests are not in their minds at all. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. And these warring factions have been here, and they want different things. So the ones that are watching out for us, possibly the ones that created us, if you believe in the ancient astronaut theory and Zechariah Sitchin, what we were told was in the 1940s, a 100-year plan was initiated to where it would be a takeover of Earth. And then if you look back into the abductions and the hybridization program, each set of hybrids that they mingled with human DNA looked less alien and more human. And that was progressing to the point where they looked almost human as recently in the last 10, 15 years, 20 years. But something changed. Before, the ETs would always take people, and I know you could vouch for this, they would take people on board, show them their hybrid children, and then say love them, and then observe that. But recently there's been a change where they've been shown household objects such as a garage door opener, say, what's this, how do you operate it? Or shown a vision of a supermarket walking down an aisle and say, what are you doing here, and what do you, basically how do you shop and what do you shop for? Or a stove, a toaster, what's this for, what does it operate? And the impression people were getting, especially Dr. David Jacobs said, that they are assimilating themselves to getting used to living amongst humans here on Earth. And when I heard that, it just stuck in the back of my mind. And then, of course, when Mr. Good explained that this 100-year plan, if it's ending in 2040 or somewhere in this decade, because it definitely started during World War II, then that would make sense, that this next 25 years is to fully assimilate them into being human. Now, you had experiences going back to the 50s, right? And you were shown several of your hybrid children, possibly up into the 100, am I correct?
I'm thinking like 250. I know it sounds outrageous. It's not outrageous to me, but you got.
Yeah, we had
I know you, Vaughn. Well, she's further.
Yeah, we had a 25-year-old woman who had 24. She said the first one she was being shown, she was only 14 years old, and there were several that they were being shown. Like she was, shocked that she was even pregnant. She never even knew at the time. But nonetheless, it's not outrageous at all for 40 years, 30 years of actually having the ability, maybe closer to 40 years of having the ability to produce.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah,
because I was pregnant like all the time, and I had a lot of time with severe PMS, and then pregnant, and all of a sudden I'm not pregnant. I had a lot of difficulties, and after I saw the And I was shown some of my children, and older children too, which would be now, they would be adults. So I was shown them, and they showed me, can you please study with your son? This is what they're asking me, because the kids want love and affection. They want to be shown something that we have because they just don't have it. And the reason why they're having us do these scenarios, because they don't know why we do anything we do. Why do we pick a certain color? Why do we have a preference for a scent? They don't even know why we're doing any of that. They even asked me, as we were talking about, she gave me these big life-size blocks that were pretty light, though. And they asked me to set up a scenario of a church, a worship. Can you set this room up to mean something to you? And I set it up just like the Orthodox Church, the big chair on the right, the altar, the pews, everything where you can go into any Greek Orthodox church, not Greek Orthodox, and you'll find the same scene. So I put that, and they looked at me like, why did you do that? Like, why does it mean something to you? I said, it's very meaningful to me.
And you also mentioned, this again just goes to prove why, what Mr. Good was saying, what David Jacobs clearly outlined in his book, The Threat, that they are looking for that takeover. But remember, it's not that all ETs are doing this. We have these actions that are definitely in our interests, and he went on to explain, which I don't want to spoil everything for everybody because you will be hearing it in 2 weeks, that we've been given crap, we as humans, not the United States, but everybody has been given crap. We actually do have a caller that just joined us. Area code 928, welcome to the show. What's your name?
Travis Walton.
Oh, Mr. Walton. It's a pleasure.
Hey, Travis.
That's Charlene McCain. Mr. Walton, you know Charlene McCain?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you're going to be speaking with her. And just as Yvonne, I don't know if you got that message, sadly, she had to go for a prior engagement, but this show is dedicated to 2 things. Number 1, as we said earlier, the tribute to our fallen hero and a great friend, Dr. Roger K. Lear, and this event this weekend where you will be hearing exactly what we're going to be talking about. Today, we can only get into so much because we don't have the time, which is why we encourage you all to come out there this weekend. Mr. Walton, I know we're talking about your case. Real quick, let me throw this last question out to Charlene, and then I'm hoping maybe you can throw a comment on that. Charlene, we were, Mr. Walton, to get you caught up, we were talking about that there's this assimilation plan where lately these hybrid children have been shown things, household objects, as if to assimilate themselves on Earth better, walking amongst us humans and not sticking out as not knowing what's going on. And Charlene was telling us about an event on board the craft where they told her that, where they basically put her in such a scenario. And I wanted to ask you also, Charlene, you said, again, this is off air, you said something along the lines of they were confused about, not just confused about that, why you put that chair there. And I can vouch for that because I too am Greek Orthodox, and every church you go in Greece, here, Russia, you'll see the exact same setup. If you're facing the altar and on the right side, there's that chair. But Charlene, was there any other confusions you had? I remember you said something about ethical questions and religious questions.
Yes. Okay, I'll tell you about the ethical questions. Well, I'll do the religious question first because they showed me, one time they were showing me the end of the world, and it was, of course, catastrophic and the fire and all that, and we were watching it. And then they said, do you want to look at something? And I went, okay. They showed me a religious relic that was shaped like, let's say, a horseshoe, but all filled in, and it was extremely dark brown, and it was so old that it looked like old brown leather with metal symbols on the top that are raised up a little bit. And they showed that to me, and I realized it was so many thousands of years old that it was part of their worship. And before that, I had no they had any religion whatsoever. But they do believe in a creator, I guess. And, I was stunned by that. And the ethical question is this, and they've given me a lot of scenarios, and I have to go for the answer. So I'm sitting actually on a panel with them where I was with other experiencers, and they're asking us all questions. And this question they put to me, why do you think we were made with so many different races? Why did your creator make so many different kinds of people? And I thought, it didn't take me any thought whatsoever. I said, well, as many colors and variations of flowers. I said, just look at that. Look at how many variations. I said, there's just not one color flower. We're made for all colors because, they're all beautiful and we belong together. It keeps the earth vibrant. That was my answer, which I was very proud of. But that's really deep in your subconscious. So I was really proud that I felt ethically that we all have a place here.
We have a few minutes till, about 4 minutes till the next break, and then when we come back, we are going to go in Mr. Walton's case. I know, Mr. Walton, each time you talk about it, I can't imagine it being something that you personally want to, because it was a very frightening experience for you. So I really I admire your bravery for doing this again and on Saturday, and you've done this past for other events. You did this again when we had the ET Media Group with Mr. Bassett, and sadly Dr. Lear was there. But you encountered, I don't want to get too much before we talk to you about your story, which is going to come right after the break, but you encountered two different types, but one of them was the standard gray type, if you will. Did you notice that they didn't really have emotions?
Well, yeah, I did. As a matter of fact, I think that the lack of emotion was what I misinterpreted as menacing, and it's kind of normal that when we encounter human beings who don't seem to care one way or the other, whose attitude towards us is totally without emotion, we generally interpret that as negative.
Exactly, and I think a lot of people have said the same thing, and especially when they try to ask these things, questions, these beings, that they really hate that. And especially, you said that, and that's something I want to ask you again after. But real quick, we do have another person who has a question. Mr. Dave Matherly is joining us. Dave, welcome to the show, and what would you like to ask, and to whom?
Yeah, the question was, do they have images of nuclear war, or was it the fiery end of the planet falling into the sun? Because I know scientists say...
Well, this is what I saw. Everything was on fire, but then I've also been in scenarios where there's earthquakes, and there's a lesson even in that. The message that was in that was that there were some very wealthy people that were hoarding, and there was a lot of people hoarding because of the catastrophes that were happening and everything. And all I wanted was a Diet Coke, I swear. I was like in this alley, and I asked this girl, I knew her family was very wealthy, I knew they had a huge stockpile, but all I was doing was helping people, and I was thirsty. So I asked, can I have a can of Coke, because I'm just on my way, down the alley to go help somebody. Anyway, her parents yelled at her and said, no, you can't share with anybody. And then there was another earthquake. You know that house fell in on all the people? And then it taught me, this is what I think they were teaching me, is to let go. If you're in fear, go help somebody else. Because it's going to be a time where it's going to be a terrible end. And saving yourself, you're not going to be saved. The house could crash in on you. That was a symbol to me.
And this brings us to our mid-hour break. Everybody,
alrighty.
We'll be back in a few short minutes. And that's right. Just a reminder that you are listening to the world's largest listener-supported station, and we need your help to continue the free flow of ideas and out of corporate hands. Go to freedomslips.com and hit the support button now. Also, all the old shows are archived on our old YouTube channel, which is Free Revolution Radio, and the new YouTube channel is Talk Revolution Radio. Now, just before the break, well, first let me tell everybody that this Saturday is an astounding event, as you heard from Yvonne last hour. CERO International, Close Encounters Resource Organization, CEROinternational.com. And there's an event in Culver City at the Culver City Veterans VA, and you will literally be getting the most bang for your buck. If you are anywhere near California, I strongly suggest you come to this event. For a mere $15, you will be hearing a panel consisting of Travis Walton, Captain Robert Salas, who was involved in the Malmstrom Air Force Base incident in 1967, where the UFO shut down the missile silo, and of course, Charlene McCain, who we've been speaking to, and Wendy, I don't want to mispronounce this last name, Wendy Piatek, if I'm not mistaken. She is a CERO member who is finally coming forward to tell her name. I believe we are also joined just now by Captain Robert Salas. Is that correct?
Yes, John, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. I am very glad you are on. Now, we did, right before the break, Mr. Walton called in, and I wanted to go first to go into his story, and then I want to go into your story, Mr. Salas, and then we want to go jump in with Charlene's story, because I want to give everybody a taste of what they're going to get this weekend. I know there's no way in this next 50 minutes, minus breaks, which will be a little over 40 minutes, we can cover exactly what you're going to hear. But this is going to give you guys, all out there listening, a slight taste of what you will see coming to CERO International this weekend in Culver City. Again, all available at CEROinternational.com. Mr. Walton, November 5th, 1975. I know you hate to relive it, but just briefly tell the listeners out there of what inspired the movie Fire in the Sky.
Well, to anyone who's actually seen the movie, they know the basic story that, there was a group of men. We were cutting trees in the forest in Arizona, and we encountered a hovering flying disc on the way home from work, and I approached it and was hit by a blast of energy from it. But the movie, really departs from what actually happened, although it did stick to one take on it, one attitude, and that was that it was horrific. And for me it was, but it's taken, these 39 years for me to come to realize that the negative impression that I got, probably wasn't warranted, that the energy that hit me wasn't like a weapon being fired at me, that it was actually an accidental discharge that just jumped through my body to the ground and accidentally injured me, making it necessary that I be taken aboard in order to save my life, in order to revive me. Because, at the remote place in the forest where we were, the nearest hospital in either direction was over an hour away. So, what I'm going to be talking about in a couple of days is really, to try to get people to consider the possibility that in many cases, the negative aspect of their experience really can very often be a misinterpretation of their intentions. Barbara Lamb said recently, spoke where she was speaking, and she was saying the same kind of things, that, and very often when she does regression on people, that it comes out that the really negative, fear and the impression that the people, that the experiencer had, that it was somehow threatening, wasn't really warranted, and that people wound up in her studies being benefited in various ways, that there was very often healings that went on.
You mentioned that it brought about the fear, and what we were saying last hour is Yvonne Smith has truly helped probably 1,000 people directly, but hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people globally. Again, if you missed last hour, I spoke to a woman from China. She was visiting from China, and she was a member of the Syro International Support Group out there. And the impact that Yvonne was having was just proven right there, because this woman, just like everybody who started, had this extremely frightening experience. That's exactly what this results in, post-traumatic stress syndrome. And that's why these events are so important, because it brings people together. If anybody has an experience, we truly request that you reach out to Yvonne and have some regression and go to the support groups, because you will find like-minded people there who you could share your story. Mr. Wong, one thing that I've noticed that changed over the years, which I really start to agree with what happened. When you were taken, that blast that hit you, and then your friends took off because they truly thought you were killed, and 5 days later you were returned, but you weren't returned to the middle of the forest. You were returned to this town, a side of a road next to a phone, or not too far from a phone, right?
Yeah, and that again contributes to the making the case that they were, concerned with my well-being. That my personal safety seemed to be what was being taken care of there.
Exactly. So it's not so much that they were taking you to experiment on you, or because they wanted to create hybrids with you. It seems to me more that this was more like an ambulance call, that they didn't want to leave you dead. You might have, knock on wood, might have passed away, and they may have revived you, kept you in their hospital, and that may have been why you had a problems breathing. But then again, you did encounter a human-looking alien who was wearing a helmet, so that could also prove that the atmosphere was different for the other ones that weren't wearing helmets. But I really agree with that, because that goes to show what we were talking about last hour with Charlene in her case, and how there's two factions. There are several of these that are looking out for us, but also there are several malevolent ones. Now, real quick, I want to go to Mr. Salas's story before I turn it to all of you, and going back and forth as basically a panel of your take on everything. Mr. Salas, I know briefly we've beaten this with the dead horse, the story with the Maelstrom Air Force Base, but I just spoke to Timothy Good, who everybody, by the way, will be joining us right here, Revolution Radio, 2 weeks from today, and outstanding man. And I told him that you were the reason, he was the reason that you came forward, because of what you read in his book, Above Top Secret, and he was just, to me, he's got several credible sources that seem to verify him. But real quick, do you mind just briefly telling what happened at Maelstrom, and then let's jump into your experience?
Well, John, I'd rather not go into what happened at Maelstrom, because I've told him this so many times.
No problem.
Really, what I'm here for is to tell my story of abduction. In 1985, I was living in Manhattan Beach with my wife, 2 kids, and one night I woke up suddenly and saw blue-gray light in the living room, and I was, of course, frightened, because I thought there was a burglar in the house, and we had 2 kids, of course. So first thing I did, I woke up my wife. She also saw the blue light, and then I told her I was going to get up off the bed, and next thing I know, I'm paralyzed, can't move, and I really fought that, that paralysis. So I struggled, tried to get my mobility back, couldn't, as much as I struggled. And I remember that struggle. It was a physical thing. This was not a dream. So I even called out for my wife, but by that time, she was, for some unknown reason, she was unconscious. And, of course, a mother wouldn't go back to sleep thinking that there might be some danger in the house. So the next thing I recall is seeing a figure in the doorway of the bedroom. And I'll show a drawing of it. I made a sketch of that. On Saturday night, I'll show it, the sketch. After that, I remember floating by her. I remember other beings being in the room. I can't recall what they looked like at this point. And then I remember being taken through a closed window, as strange as that sounds. But I do recall that. As a matter of fact, I recall thinking that that I had locked the window, and they did not know how to open it, because it was a double-hung latch window. But they didn't open it. The next thing I recall is being on the craft, and I'll go into what happened on the craft on Saturday. It's a little detailed that I'd rather not get into here, but let's just say there was some pain involved, and but when I complained about the pain went away immediately. And then I remember some other things that, well, some other things were brought back to me through not hypnotherapy, but another kind of deep meditation session that I had, which again I'll talk about some more. And then I find myself back in my bedroom. But I didn't talk about this. Matter of fact, I didn't even remember a lot of this until about 10 years ago. And of course, this happened in 1985, before I went public with my other story. But I think as a result of looking into other cases and talking to other abductees, and the vivid reality of what I just described, like I said, these were not dreams. And three reasons that convinced me that they weren't dreams. One was the pain involved. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And then the other reason is the struggle I had during the paralysis. And then the third reason, of course, is my wife finally admitting to me that she also saw the blue light. And that was only about 7 years ago.
Mr. Walton and Miss McCain, blue lights, that's very common in abduction cases. Did either of you recall having blue lights? I know, Miss McCain, you've had several, but Mr. Walton, when you were on board the craft, or maybe when you saw it from the outside, was there a blue light at all emanating from it? Because it's a very common thing we hear.
No, the beam was described as being blue or blue, greenish blue, but I really don't know what form of energy that was. There's two major theories: that it was either some sort of a charge that built up in the craft as a side effect of its propulsion system, and the other being simply analogous to the charge that builds up in the surface of an airplane just from traveling at high speed through the air. They have recorded up to 500,000 volts in the surface of airplanes, which makes it necessary to attach a grounding wire before you attempt to refuel them, to avoid a spark that could ignite the fuel. And, a UFO traveling much faster than aircraft would, potentially, possibly build up a much higher charge. So I really don't know what the nature of that was.
I can chime in on this business of charge surrounding UFOs. There's some famous photographs I forget the name of the guy that took them down. But one of the photographs shows a ring of black soot that was left behind as the UFO took off high speed. And it was determined, or well, the theory was that the black soot was actually smog, the residue of smog in the air that accumulated on the craft as a result of a static attraction, static electricity attraction. And when it left,
but that could happen.
And when it left this big black ring. But anyway, yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and introduce our first caller. Area code 818, welcome to the show. What's your name and who would you like to ask a question to?
Okay, great. Yeah, I'd like to ask a question to Mr. Travis Walton. Did you get any sort of impression for, like, why were they trying to stop you from getting close to them?
Well, that was one theory in the early days, that they had fired a beam, just mistaking my approach of being some kind of threat. But now, it might not have been an actual beam that was fired at all. Now, some of the sounds that the craft were emitting, there was a high-pitched, the guys in the craft described it as a beeping tone, but it didn't sound like a beep to me. But still, they speculated that was actually a warning me not to get so close. But if the energy that jumped from that craft through my body wasn't like a focused beam that was fired, it was just an accidental discharge of this energy buildup, it wouldn't have been anything deliberate, and it might even have been, that the reason they were rising up as I got close was with the idea that they wanted to put more distance between me and them to prevent that energy from accidentally jumping. And if you've ever walked across the carpet in the winter or when really dry air and then touch something that grounds out that spark that jumps, is kind of a microscopic version of what might have happened right there. One of the crew members later became a journeyman electrician, and he says that it sounded to him like high voltage, that when some of these high voltage equipment, that when the switches are actuated, that it sounded like that to him. But there was a definite sound when the energy came out of the craft and hit me. Actually, one of the sheriff's reports, the deputy said the crewman described it as looking like a long blue flame, but other guys described it as looking like a laser beam, or like a bolt of lightning. But I guess if there was a giant spark, that's kind of how it might look.
Yeah, exactly. If it was a high voltage enough spark, it may have been straightened out to the point where it looked like a beam.
It lit up the night forest brighter than the noonday sun. Just as far as you could see, it was brighter than daylight.
Well, thank you.
We are coming close to our break. I want to ask you all this question. This might carry over to the next thing. All of you clearly started with fear, and then that's why Yvonne is trained in post-traumatic stress syndrome, and that's what obviously got her to this field of helping these people, hundreds of thousands, literally, because of her international support groups. Have all of you come to terms with this? I guess we'll begin with Charlene, and then we'll go to the captain and Mr. Walton.
Okay, what happened was that I had been so traumatized by I felt interference from getting abducted, getting strangely, Mr. Salas actually were neighbors at that time. I was living right in the town over. The exact same thing was happening to me. We didn't realize this until like a couple months ago. But anyway, it's a strange small world. But anyway, I was very traumatized. So back then, this would be by the time 88, 89. I had been so traumatized, and my best friend, after we saw the UFO in '87, we realized we were getting abducted together. We constantly see each other in dreams. We see the same beings and the same scenarios. And I was all the baby thing, and then you get kind of paranoid. I was worried, so I actually wrote a letter to Harvard. I was in a lot of pain, suffering from PTSD and stuff. And when I wrote to Harvard, it got to Dr. John Mack, and Dr. Mack is the one who wrote me back, and he said, well, he would take me in a second. He believed everything I said. But when I let go of that envelope, I was paralyzed with fear. I can't tell you. I went, the military's going to come and get me. Is this it, the break?
Yes, it is. Right when we come back, we'll finish this. Everybody stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay, bye.
Welcome back to the final leg of Third Phase Moon Radio. I'm your host, Dr. J, with my lovely production assistant, Laura Lee Solomon, who's been monitoring the chat room for questions. And we have an amazing panel here consisting of Captain Robert Salas, Mr. Travis Walton, and Miss Charlene McCain, who are all going to be speaking this weekend at Cero International. Again, go to CeroInternational.com, CERO International.com, for a whopping $15, which is nothing, to be able to see this panel and to hear the stories in detail, which obviously we're not going to be able to get to in 20 minutes time. It's really worth it. I've been to every single one of these Cero events, and truly they are amazing experiences, unlike other events. Real quick, I just want to remind everybody out there, if you've captured anything amazing, be sure and send it to us via Skype or Facebook at Third Phase of Moon. We are the largest UFO YouTube channel. Since the mainstream media doesn't broadcast footage, we do. And we invite you to send us the footage, and you, the public, are the jury. If you find it to be hoaxes, please let us know so we can expose it. And when they are real, we absolutely would love corroborating witness testimony and everything like that. Just real quick, we want to tell everybody, be sure and stay tuned every week, Thursdays, 8 to 10 Eastern Time, right here, same time, same channel, Revolution Radio. We'll be having Timothy Good, Jim Mars making a return, and of course, astronaut, Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell. Quick, brief interview with him because he is getting to his elderly age. And also remember, all shows are archived on Revolution Radio's YouTube channel, which is Talk Revolution Radio. Now, just before we got to the break, I was posing the question to all three of the panelists who are on with us, if they've come to terms with what has happened, since everything has started with fear, and it has taken support and Yvonne's work to get them to tell their stories, at least except for Mr. Walton, who this was known obviously when it happened, but with Captain Salas coming forward and several people that we've had tell their stories for the first time here and at Cero, clearly are making an impact. Charlene, I know you got caught before the break. I want to let you go ahead and finish your answer before we turn to Captain Salas and Mr.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was just I wanted to bring up Yvonne because that's who I went to. And he said he would take me in Boston at Harvard because he believed me. But then he said, well, since you're in California, I have this woman that is really great and you really like her. It was Yvonne. And we're talking, a long time ago when I remember she was just still completing her license. And I've been going there ever since, and that's how I've got a lot of help. I was, I can't somehow be put under, what would you say, or what I was supposed to do during hypnotherapy, but I used it actually for stress management, and it really, really helped me because I had a lot of odd physical anomalies, like Charles was talking about the electrical problem. I had a terrible time with electricity. As a matter of fact, when I went to get one of the sessions one time, I was at her house, and she had a couch there, she had this lamp, and I looked at the lamp, I said, Yvonne, I'm worried about your lamp, and she looked at me, she has these big brown eyes, and she's so open and welcoming, When she looked at me, she says, what do you mean? I said, Yvonne, I'm having a problem with electricity, and just then, an arc came from the lamp. You could hear it go, zzz, 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 and it hit me right in the head, and it flat right on my head. She looked at me like, oh my God. So I'm just trying to tell you this stuff is true. I'm not making anything up.
Captain, what about you? Have you come to terms with what has happened? Because I know, again, this started, obviously, as a very fearful situation with you.
Well, the short answer is no. I have not come to terms with it, primarily because I don't have all the answers yet. I mean, I've got some bits and pieces of what happened to me, but there's still a lot of questions. And I do at times wake up yelling out. My wife has had to calm me down after a bad dream a few times, even lately. So at times, I feel some fear around it. But I also want to chime in with what Travis said, and that is there have been times when I feel really elated by some of the things that I've discovered and that I've dreamt. And I will be talking about some of my dreams. I kept a dream journal, and these dreams are, I think, related to the experience. So we'll all talk about those things. But no, it was not all a negative experience. And I agree completely that a lot of abductees come through this with enhanced abilities of some sort or another. And I'll talk about that more in depth also.
Absolutely. And, one thing I'd like to add there is that, again, with our passing of good friend Dr. Lear, who was a mentor to me in so many ways, I could only aspire to be the as warm as he is when I'm at his age, and as humble as he is, and talk to everybody. Obviously, you were all friends with him as well. Some of you going way back further with him, probably especially you, Mr. Walton, since you've been talking about your story for nearly 40 years. And it's a very sad day. Again, the tribute will be this Saturday at 0. And one thing I also wanted to comment earlier with what you said when you were taken through the window, there was another person that we spoke to here whose child was also taken, and she suspected it but didn't want to say it to him in the next morning. And the next morning, she asked him, did you sleep good last night? And he basically said to her, yes, the aliens came to visit me again last night, as if he was really happy. And she goes, but they always get mad at me. And she said, why? He goes, well, when they take me through the door, it's closed door. She went on to say it was a closed door. It wasn't open. I see all these bubbles, colored balls, and I always want to stay in between the door, and they always get mad at me because they tell me that it's dangerous to stay. So it's almost as if they're manipulating the matter itself to create what is a hard object for us, something that can be easily passed through to the literally molecular level. And I think that's what this child was experiencing. So I just wanted to comment on that. Mr. Walton, almost 40 years, 39 years just this past November. It'll be 40 this coming November. Have you come to terms with this?
Well, I talked about how the movie, portrayed it as horrific, and, that was how I interpreted it at the time. But, every time I've talked about it for so many years, it was like reliving that trauma. And although I've come to an intellectual understanding that their intentions were not to frighten me or to torment me, but, when I recount it, my mind still relives the feeling that I had at the time rather than the intellectual understanding that I have of it. So, I hope to get to that point so that, my emotional reaction to it is on a par with my intellectual understanding of what their intentions were.
One thing that I've been saying all the time, to especially, again, this is directed to you listeners, disclosure is in your hands. We've been working very closely with Mr. Bassett, and we've had several of the interviewed several of the witnesses here more than once, talking about, to keep the hearings alive, talking about the citizen hearing. And we really hope that we get to that level where the United Nations finally makes an announcement and tells us the truth. But I still have the feeling that we're never going to be told everything, obviously, because I think the truth, the full truth might be far scarier than it really is, but at least the acknowledgement that we've been visited. And the reason why I say disclosure is in your hands, everybody, is because it's you. If you had an experience, you got to come forward and talk about it, because each person that talks about it inspires the next. And as for those who joined us late, in the very first segment with Yvonne, we were talking about how when we made our first documentary, which was focused on Dr. Lear, one of the serial members came forward to speak, and she wanted to remain silhouetted with no name, and we respected and we did that. But after that, the other serial members who saw that said, you know, if she's telling her story, I want to too. But they came forward with their full names and their faces, and we did alien abduction diaries. Well, when we did that, several more serial members who I didn't even know were experiencers came to me and told me, hey, I'm ready to talk. And as a matter of fact, again, we, like I said a couple weeks ago, we had Marin on here telling her story for the first time publicly, and we hope that she does so again in the future at one of these events. But disclosure is in your hands, because not only do you have to share the information, I think that because so many millions of people are taken, if just 2 million alone, I say just as in the wrong way, if 2 million people in the United States alone have been taken, imagine what that is worldwide. I mean, 1 in 40 people, maybe disclosure is happening by these beings having direct contact with one person by one person, or having an experience. And I wanted to pose that to you, all three of you on this panel. What do you think of that statement? Do you think that is how disclosure will happen, by having such, again, like having experiences and contacts and these people coming forward, so with such an overwhelming amount of people that the government can't deny it? I guess we'll start with, we'll go reverse order this time. Charlene, and then we'll go to Mr. Walton, and then Mr. Captain Salas.
Okay, so my thoughts on this, even just recently, are that it's almost like worldwide we're kind of like coming awake. And I think that's the way it's going to happen, rather than they're going to, since they're already here, they're in our bedrooms, we're sharing DNA, I think they're just going to reveal more and more of themselves to us. And slowly but surely we'll become aware of them and incorporate them, and there's not going to be like an overthrow or anything like that. I think they're just, what they're doing now, they're just slowly getting to be part of us, and people with awareness are actually being aware that they're here, what they're doing. There's a lot of gifts that go along with it. It's not all bad. And I just think, for me, I think it's happening slowly. Awareness, and like we're waking up and coming out of denial, or we're just understanding what we couldn't bear before. It's hard to stand this, but then now that I'm older, I can stand it, but I can also learn from it.
I totally agree, and I think that's, and by you telling this to everybody out there, they too can learn from it. Mr. Walton?
Yeah, well, you know, I'll be talking a lot more about this on Saturday, but basically, if by disclosure you mean the, you know, petition push to, you know...
That, or just the fact that everybody on Earth is going to know that we have visitors and maybe contact. Captain, we seem to be getting some feedback off your end. Is everything going okay there? Is it issue with the phone?
Oh, no, everything's fine here.
Okay. Anyway, sorry, Mr. Wong. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that the disclosure thing is it's a noble effort, but I'm a little bit dubious about whether the government's ever going to say, okay, and if people want this, we're going to fess up that we've been lying to you for years. They're just not going to do that unless they're forced to. And, you know, as far as the government coming out with things, it would be some kind of an undeniable thing where the government no longer could maintain that position. Like a whistleblower came out with the files, or some major undeniable incident, a UFO crashes in the middle of a city or something that's so undeniable that they're forced to come forward. But we could always hope, I think that it's still constructive to do these kinds of things because it still illustrates the position that the government is maintaining at this time. However, to the larger issue that you were talking about, just worldwide acceptance, I think there definitely is a trend in the direction, like Charlene said, of a greater awareness worldwide that it's all part of getting there, and we're getting closer, but we're not there yet.
I completely agree with you there. I believe more people are becoming acclimated to what has been happening and accepting with what is happening. And that's why I say I fear that the government will never step forward and say it unless they are forced to by an overwhelming amount of people either seeing it or these giant armadas flying over us, or by other countries disclosing, forcing the United States to disclose. Captain Salas, what's your take on this? Because you, having been a military man, saw for yourself firsthand the secrecy involved with the government and the military industrial complex with regards to this topic.
Well, if we're talking about governmental disclosure, I do think eventually that will happen. And for basically the reason you mentioned, that is the number of, let's say, quality cases that are becoming more and more open. I know as a result of my participation in the citizens hearing, for example, I was able to get a couple more strong witnesses to come forward for the first time. And I think this kind of thing is going to snowball. More and more people will come forward, and the government will not be able to deny the evidence. I don't know when that would happen, but I think eventually it will happen. It has to happen. And the reason it has to happen is because from the perspective of, let's say, ET, they have not been shy about exposing themselves. I mean, we've had mass sightings, we've had millions of abductions. They have made contact, period. And there's no question about that. And so they're not shy about saying that they're here. We're here, and basically they've got some kind of an objective with us humans. They're doing something with us humans, and what exactly that is, what objectives that they have, is still a mystery to us, and that's one of the reasons I think we're having this conference on Saturday, where we want to share the knowledge of what we have and try to come up with some conclusions as to what might be happening here. But this is a process, and yeah, I think eventually it will conclude with some kind of admission by the government that something's happening. Now, will they admit everything? No, I don't think so. I don't think they'll admit everything that they have, or even if they do, how many people out there really trust the government to tell the complete truth about anything? But
I don't think people trust them as much these days anymore.
Yeah, right.
After World War II, I think if you were told to shut up during the days of Roswell, people were patriots. We just gotten out, we were the victors, and people listened. But now the distrust in the government is so great that I fear for it. I remember watching the hearings. I wasn't there, but I watched them remotely, all of them. And I saw the transformation over those 5 days of the five retired congressmen and, of course, Senator Gravel, who came in with an open mind, all open minds, and left fully convinced of the two statements. One, we are being engaged by an extraterrestrial or extradimensional, at least one extraterrestrial, extradimensional race. And two, the United States government and world governments have known about it and have deliberately kept it secret since at least 1947. Following this, Senator Gravel has joined us twice already in the last couple months, and he's been talking about some startling information that obviously he wouldn't have said before. And one of the main things I asked him is, what was why were you convinced? What was the number one reason? And he said, of course, there were several, but the number one was the credibility of the witnesses, such as yourself, and just like Mr. Airman First Class Burroughs, who we spoke to last weekend. It's people like you guys who are coming forward and talking about this. We do have another question coming from caller 818, who I believe is Dave, right?
Sure. Yeah. First, a brief statement, and I think I can answer the question why the government is so reluctant to engage in any kind of general disclosure, and that is because of the panic that the War of the Worlds had inflicted on the public. I think they really believe that there's a large portion, and maybe they're correct, there's a large portion of our population, say the more fundamentally religious people, who will not be able to handle the fact that that they'll have to deal with species of intelligent beings not from this earth, and they'll see them as devils or demons or fallen angels or the whatever. And I think that really frightens our loving overlords. But that's my opinion. But my question is this: to the three of you, I know some of you have mentioned that you have children. Abductees have oftentimes mentioned that the experience is passed on from parent to child. Is there anything that you guys have said, any approach that you've taken towards your children to allow them to know that this might be happening to them, or are you open about this in any way that would prepare them for the experience that they may have or may be having in regard to abductions?
I guess we'll start in whoever wants to take it first. I'll just leave it open. Captain, Mr. Walton, Charlene?
Okay, well, I'll say this. I've already said that my kids were in the house when I was taken. And I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to involve my children in this discussion at this point. I'm still dealing with this myself, me and my wife. I will talk about my wife's experience, and I think she was also an abductee. But we'll talk about that a little bit more on Saturday. But my children right now are grown. They're no longer kids. They're adults, but they've got lives of their own, and I'm not going to embroil them in this discussion at this point until, of course, I've got their permission to do so. So that's all I'll say about that.
Well, I agree with that. All of us are, very protective of our children, and so, we're reluctant to bring them into that. But I think just by osmosis, my kids have an understanding that would prepare them for any such thing. That I think they would handle it better than most were something to happen to them. But that's about all I want to say about that.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel very protective over my children. They don't necessarily want to talk about it. They're both professionals, and I can't even bring up my best friend's name because she feels the same way, and she's been NASA trained to do what she does. So I love them very much. They have told me things growing up. We have a lot of actual psychic stuff going on between us, and tremendous amount of that going on, and a little bit of the other, so I guess I'm not going to talk about it either.
I just want to throw one comment. The younger generation is far, far more open to this, and I know all of you can definitely vouch for this, that our understanding of science when you were growing up was way different than when I was growing up. Even when I was growing up, no planets existed outside of our solar system, and now they're finding thousands. I mean, there's trillions of them in probably our galaxy alone, let alone all over the universe, and so many of them are falling to this Goldilocks zone, and now they've actually expanded it. So when you ask someone young if they believe, they are absolutely into it. Now, we got just a short minute and a half before. I wanted to give you all a brief closing statement and to tell people why they need to come this Saturday, aside from the fact that you will all be having an exciting experience at Zero International, zerointernational.com in Culver City, $15. Final closing comments? Anybody?
Yes, be sure to come this Saturday because, you know, my fellow panelists actually have books. They're very astonishing, and I think they're bringing some with them that you can have signs that people begging me to get everybody's books, and they want them signed by Travis and Robert, and it's going to be amazing. So come and meet everybody firsthand, and we all get to know each other. I have a lot of friends showing up, and I want to thank you so much for this opportunity to have us on the air.
Absolutely. Mr. Walton?
Yeah, well, you know, I just encourage people to come because, you know, this is actually kind of a subject, an area of discussion in regards to this that I normally don't get to address that much, and it really is, you know, kind of the fruit of a lot of thinking that's gone on over the years, and a lot of more recent conclusions that I've come to.
Captain Salas, we got 15 seconds. You want to make a brief statement real quick?
This is an important and unique opportunity. The abduction phenomenon is very important. It's really happening. Millions of people have been abducted. We have to figure out what the hell's going on, and I think this is part of the way we're going to do that by having an open discussion about it. So I would really, you know, this is important. Show up.
Absolutely. Everybody, Saturday, zerointernational.com in Culver City.
Third phase of moon.